I just saw this and the wording on this is a bit negative towards our brand. Is there any way to not use such term like overpriced VRM on the title? Was it necessary to include the damage to the laptop in the article? I would like to share the review. I just wouldn't like to have readers make any wrong assumptions about the product and its quality. Is that okay if we don't publish this review, please? Please do not publish anything and let us try to remedy this while we sync to work together. My HQ is not really happy with this. Just another question. Would you think we don't expect the video could be taken off, but do you think that for the video title, we could just do MSI Bravo 15 review and take the disappointing out? The reason we offered the money to you is because we believe your time is valuable. If you spend a couple hours on the review and then you don't release it, we should compensate your time. It's not paying you to say positive on the MSI product. It's about we pay you because you spent time to do this. But eventually you can't release the video because we have to consult on the product review. I just feel like if it is not a factory defect or result of a widespread known issue, that we should exclude it from the article. This isolated case is something our headquarters is taking very seriously. Before that, this video is brought to you by you and the Gamers Nexus store at store.gamersnexus.net. We're forfeiting the last leg of an ad campaign with MSI after the company's latest outburst of what we think to be unethical behavior. And the only reason we can walk away from the advertising money is because our viewers support us. This level of independence is thanks to all of you buying Gamers Nexus PC building mod mats, which are high quality anti-static materials to protect tables and components alike. It's also thanks to purchasing our desk size mouse mats with a fully custom blue rubber underside, blue stitching, and PC component wireframe designs to fit your building hobby, and our shirts, glassware, and posters. The mod mats and mouse mats are on back order and sell through constantly and instantly, but the next round arrives in just a few weeks. To guarantee you'll get the next run, go to store.gamersnexus.net and get an order in today while supporting our independent reporting. We fired a warning shot in 2015, and now we're more going straight for the nail in the coffin with this one. Our reviews are often brazenly critical. That's not news to anybody watching this. But that comes with it the territory of a trail of bridges in various states of burning, smoldering in the background. That's okay though, because companies blacklist reviewers all the time. Happens to us yearly with a revolving door of companies coming in and out of who's blacklisted us next. But typically by the next review cycle, it's fine. It all smooths out. So maybe you miss one product, but for the most part, people get over it. PR people move around in the industry all the time. And the really good PR people, the really good tech marketing people who want to see things improve, they're doing the right thing. They want to see the product improve. And they're normally more on the reviewer's side than they are on the company side. But not every company has one of those people. MSI is one of the companies that is lacking that person to push back on headquarters and say, you know what? They're right. The people in media are right about this product, and we could do better. So in this one, we're going to be talking about years of examples about how we feel like MSI tries to subtly strong-arm reviewers into taking down or changing reviews that are critical, and about how we think they try to delay reviewers and prevent publication of critical reviews so that the review becomes irrelevant by the time it does get published, and basically do everything possible to prevent the publication of something bad rather than trying to fix the issue and work with people. And this is coming up now as opposed to years ago when a lot of these things happened with us because Tech Team GB, a YouTuber, experienced issues recently and tagged us in the tweets about it. So if you missed it, check out Tech Team GB's coverage of the laptop. But his main issues were that he found some thermal concerns, and if you look at the underside of the laptop with the cover on and then with the cover off, which you can see in his review and we'll show it, you'll see that the fans have really no access to air. So regardless of what numbers exactly MSI is producing, this is still a terrible design. It's a horrible design oversight, and the company is trying to not only defend it, but if you've been out of the loop on the story, look through Tech Team GB's Twitter feed, you'll see that part of what they've done was to also offer compensation if the review went unpublished. MSI framed this by saying that this is for just paying for the time. But obviously the perception is that it feels a little bit worse. So Tech Team GB has done a great job of standing up to this bad behavior, and if you haven't subscribed to him, you should check him out. He's trying to build a channel that's built upon the values of doing things ethically like we have always done, and we're happy to point you his way. In the past, we published an article called The Slimy Underside of the Hardware Industry. That was in 2015. At the time, I was the one who wrote it, and I had a good amount of experience in the industry, but not nearly as much as today, obviously. It's about doubled in the time since. I've been doing this since about 2008, but only in the hardware side since maybe more seriously 2012 or so. So 2015 is when we published The Slimy Underside of the Hardware Industry. The companies in that piece were not named. We did that explicitly. The entire point of publishing that piece was to be a warning shot, so that the companies who were kind of watching our site and staying in tune with what we do would be aware of, okay, let's not try things like functionally attempted bribery to get something taken down, which has happened to us. That was one of the things we detailed. We've had other companies assert that they want strong reviews referring to the product, saying they don't want to send them out just because they're worried that the roundup will conclude with, you should buy this if you do X, and you should buy that if you do Y, which is, of course, the actual conclusion, not you should always buy X for everything. But that's what one of the companies in the past wanted to see. We haven't named them, and unless something happens, we won't. But MSI now does get named, and that's because of how it's behaving at this point. So if you're wondering what are our credentials for criticizing MSI and experiencing some of the things that these newer YouTube channels are experiencing, apparently, and we have seen the conversations with Tech Team GB and MSI, so we are aware of that one actually definitely happening. If you're wondering our credentials, we've got quite a few of them, and the video editors should be flashing through them on the screen now. So we have a lot of experience criticizing MSI and dealing with this type of stuff. So let's recap the Tech Team GB thing first before really getting into this. Recently, YouTuber Tech Team GB tweeted that MSI had requested him to take down a review of a laptop, whereupon Tech Team GB found several thermal issues and other issues related to the laptop. Before that, it felt like MSI was stalling Tech Team GB on publication for as long as possible, which is a common tactic that we certainly feel like the company has used on us in the past when we were less scary, I guess, than now. And we've experienced both of those, but mostly we've handled it privately. This happened to us, again, as far back as 2015. We'll go over those emails. MSI is still continuing with this behavior with younger outlets, and that means it's time for us to try and correct it from the position we're in today and leverage the position we're in today to try and do some good for the newer YouTubers, the newer reviewers, and therefore the industry at large. Because it feels like MSI and others attempt to strong-arm reviewers, and in our opinion, as they do that, they are going to damage the industry, they're going to damage the credibility of reviewers, and they're going to cause ethical problems in the review space where there are already enough ethical concerns that exist. We don't need more of them. So that's why this video needs to happen. It is not our intent to destroy MSI in any way. It's our intent to hopefully inflict change. MSI, you need to change. And at this point, it's obviously not going to happen privately. So we're doing this publicly, and all of this is backed up by emails. So MSI, deal with it. It's your writing that we're reading. As an example of things we've dealt with in the past from companies, we have dealt with everything from simple stuff like threatened review samples getting pulled. That's typically what we mean when we say the word blacklisted. And we've also dealt with things like threats at lawsuits, but haven't actually been through one yet. So it is a concern, obviously, in the reviews industry. But products we've reviewed that have been proven commercial failures and were later fixed by the companies, which we can't name for this one, we have been aware of considerations of lawsuits. So it's pretty serious when you review a product critically. This is not something that, it doesn't matter if they're right. You can sue anyone, at least in the US, for any reason, and even if the person doing the suing isn't correct, it still costs both parties money, and one of them is a lot less powerful than the other. So my advice to the newer YouTubers is to, if you're right and you can prove you're right, try not to back down, and if you need it, reach out to me, and we'll try and help you out. But on the legal side, we haven't had to go through it. Just wanted to point out for people watching that this is a consideration that we all have. It is not one I think many reviewers have been through, but we've kind of stepped on a lot of toes, and that's where you start hearing about that stuff getting discussed. Anyway, that's a different discussion. So MSI, as Tech Team GB pointed out, sometimes feels to reviewers like us like MSI is using tactics to try and stall newer reviews. And if criticisms are published, it seems like it tries to get them removed. MSI's defense to this would be that technically they're just asking a question. Could you change the title? But it's sort of like going into an alley and an 8-foot-tall guy with a knife says, it'd be a good idea if you gave me your wallet. To reviewers, especially smaller ones, that feels intimidating, even if it's technically asking a question. Can you withhold this review from publishing? This behavior overall, it's extremely important that we note this, is rare. It's very rare. Not many of the companies behave like this. The ones that do, if you're a new reviewer, just ignore them and do your thing, do the right thing. If you want to be anything like us, do what you think is right and fuck the companies. Like, just do what you think is right by the people buying the stuff. That's me talking to any new reviewers out there or smaller channels who are maybe afraid of review samples getting threatened. Don't be afraid of that. It doesn't matter. You lose some access, yes, you'll get it back. Go work with someone else. And then talk about your experience and grow from that. That's my advice. But and I'm sharing that because I would rather see the industry move in the direction of being ethical and honest about things and not being overpowered by companies that are threatening in any way. Question of why now? Well, why now, again, is because this is still happening, and we want to make sure that it is unsuccessful in trying to silence meaningful, valid, and well-tested criticisms, and that MSI instead pursue maybe improving its products. And if there is a criticism which is invalid, then perhaps work with the reviewer to try and figure out what the problem is, get the product back, retest it, whatever needs to happen to get the data to the point where it's correct and accurate from both parties testing. Okay, there's a lot of other stuff we should really sort of preface here, but the main one is that as you get deeper into the industry, you learn that the engineers and the PMs are sort of the good guys, and a lot of the media reps at these less than ethical companies, those are the ones you want to bypass those people. They're put there as linebackers to try and block the engineers. Engineers are often not allowed to talk to reviewers for a lot of good reasons. They don't have media training. They say things that are often true. And that's a lot of the engineers we work with will willingly tell us the faults of the product. So those are what we consider the good guys in terms of trying to work with someone who actually wants to build something good and not worry about the PR side of things. Now, that said, there are a lot of extremely good PR people, a lot of extremely good technical marketing people, and these people typically shuffle around between companies. You carry the relationship with them when they move from one to the next. So you lose someone at one place, you gain someone somewhere else. That's the nature of the industry. And the people who are really good at this are typically, it feels like, more on our side than they are on the side of the company they work at, which is great because they want to improve the product. So not everyone's like this, really trying to make that clear so that people don't get the wrong opinion about the entire industry. It's really not, it's not like this. It's just MSI is making everyone look bad right now. Let's get into our examples before we go through more of Tech Team GB's. It's gonna be a long video because there's really a lot of important stuff to say. Our first one is from an old written review from 2015. This was way back when we reviewed laptops. MSI sent us a laptop that had this problem. There was clearly a design flaw that caused the lid to crack when the screen was opened. We talked about this in the written article. We were more of a written article site back then than YouTube. And this is something that today probably I would make a huge deal out of and put it in the thumbnail. But we were more focused on the overall product. We sort of, being newer at it, took MSI at its word that it had never seen this before I learned that's what everyone says. And we sort of talked about it in the first page of the review and then moved on to the rest of the product. So anyway, clearly a design flaw. We were relatively positive about the laptop overall. We pointed out that the lid snapped immediately. We also said that it's easy to put back together, because it was. And we also reached out to MSI and asked for comment, which they provided for review. So we noted that we were concerned that the housing would crack after repeat openings and closings. And we think that everyone would agree it would be unfair or unfitting of a reviewer trying to do their job properly to forget to publish this information, even though you can easily snap the lid back together. It didn't ship that way. So MSI didn't agree with this. The next email is from a former MSI representative who transferred to a few other companies. And this email was sent by that representative in response to our notification. Awesome, thanks, Steven. However, was it necessary to include the damage to the laptop in the article? I just feel like if it is not a factory defect or result of a widespread known issue, that we should exclude it from the article. There's more to this, but we're going to stop there. I responded to this in a very professional, mature, calm, and measured way back then, but I haven't grown up in this industry. It's gotten less patient over time. So, first of all, MSI, this ain't no we. You aren't we. We're not in this together. We're not a team. It's not, what was the exact quote here? We should exclude it from the article. There is no we. So MSI, you weren't here when I was making $180 in my first year, working every hour of my life to build what became this. You weren't here for that. It's not a team effort. We could exist without MSI ever working with us again, and it's unlikely we would notice. So that's how I felt about that email then. I responded in an extremely, unbelievably professional fashion, and I can't believe that I did because that email is outrageous. Anyway, secondly, MSI says it can't be a widespread issue. Well, duh, because it was a review sample, which typically means that it's from before it goes public. Third, it's a review sample. Our policy is pretty simple. If we find a flaw in the product, we're going to cover it. Doesn't matter if it's a review sample. The Lian Li mesh case that we looked at not long ago, actually the pre-mesh, but the Lanquil 2, we talked about how there's a chip in the magnet in the door that you'll never see. That's not a big issue. Lian Li didn't freak out about it. You know what they did? They put foam on the friggin' tiny magnets, and that issue was resolved. That's the correct response. MSI instead is trying to say that we shouldn't talk about it, or we shouldn't have back then, because somehow this is not going to be a widespread issue and we're supposed to trust them. And here's the thing. If you can't get a laptop to a reviewer without defects, why should we trust that you, MSI, can get a laptop to a customer without defects? That's what I didn't voice as angrily as I am now. So you know where it's going, you know why it's going there, and it should be in the best state possible. I took them at their word back then. I was naive, but it wasn't shipping damage looking back at it. This was just actually a problem with that laptop. It might have been a manufacturing defect. But anyway, let's get back to the email. Quote, I would like to share the review. I just wouldn't like to have readers make any wrong assumptions about the product and its quality. So I'm not bowing to a bully here. That is a threat. And if it's not intended, wasn't intended to be one, it was perceived as one. And MSI knows the between the lines BS that they're playing. It's basically, that's a nice review you have there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. So back when we were smaller, a lot of our early traffic came from social media sites and shares on Facebook when it was relevant. MSI was trying to use that as a lever to remove the criticism of its fatberg of a product at the time. And so we replied, again, a lot more kindly than I would have today. But here's the response, just to give you an idea. This is from us. Quote, I understand your concern and empathize with where you're coming from. Our loyalty lies with our readers, and we have to make sure that all defects, even if they are rare, are reported fairly to maintain the correct balance of reporting. Rarity does not negate occurrence. A bit later in the reply, we wrote this, quote, the section comprising the damage is 84 words. The entire review runs 3,200 words, most of them positive. The 84 words used to describe the defect contain the following. A subquote, we've encountered one somewhat major issue with our GT72 unit, but suspect and have been informed that it is likely that this is shipping damage. It popped back together easily enough, end quote. Further in the email, we said, if reporting a defect excludes a review from being shared, that is an exchange I am willing to make in order to retain integrity, objectivity, and independence from industry pressure to curate review content. If you're new to this, you want to be like us, that's the way to do it. You got, if you really believe in what you said and what you found, stand by it. So anyway, at the time we said that because of discussions with MSI at the time, it could have been shipping damage. And really looking back today, if I were told that now, I wouldn't have believed it and I would have pressured a lot harder. But the point is that MSI freaked out about something that was a really small section of a review. And that was, from my perspective today, as someone much more experienced now, that was what I would consider to be too light-handed in my review, talking about that defect, and they still freaked out. So anyway, we wouldn't have the patience for that kind of response today, but that's why we are where we are now. Before we make even more points about how this issue is deeply ingrained in MSI's culture, allow us to present Further examples, this next one is from 2017 and is from a different representative. Back when we released our PCB analysis on the MSI X370 Titanium, hosted by Buildzoid, we posted the video with the title, quote, "Overpriced VRM design on MSI X370 X-Power Titanium." The thumbnail read, quote, "Disappointing VRM," and still does. That board was killed quickly by MSI in terms of production. It kind of left the market, and that series hasn't made much of a return, and the company eventually came back to make some of the best VRMs and boards on the AMD market, but it did take a few years, and it wasn't without attempting other methods at improving public perception first. The first attempt to not fix the product, but fix the image, was to contact us and request a change. Here's a screenshot of the conversation. Quote, "Hey Steven," and then a screenshot of our video. "I just saw this, and the wording on this is a bit negative towards our brand. First of all, this is more or less exactly what MSI said to Tech Team GB, so it is still using this phrasing. This is different representatives across multiple years, so this is something that we think might be trained at the company, although we don't have evidence to support that it's trained at the company, but certainly one could assume that based on this behavior, it might be." MSI at the time was upset that 26,000 people had seen a video that it perceived as, quote, negative towards its brand. We can see how many people hear about that now. See how that worked out. So continuing on, we responded with, quote, "Yeah, it's a price disproportionate VRM design on a $300 board. You guys used the same FETs on $150 boards," and then we affirmed our trust in Buildzoid's opinion. MSI said, quote, "But he didn't have the board? Question mark. He was using Photoshop to do the video. Is the board picture from you?" We said, "That's the style we do for all those PCB videos. Check any of his PCB analysis videos, for example." And then we linked our MSI 1080 Ti Gaming X analysis, which was actually positive. It wasn't an accident that we linked this one. It was a reminder that we play fair. If it's good, we say it's good. If it sucks, we say it sucks. MSI then had the wherewithal to ask this, quote, "Is there any way to not use such a term like overpriced VRM on the title?" And we said, "You take the good with the bad. The motherboard is way overpriced. The GPU is pretty good." MSI's representative said to us, quote, "I think that's what they are concerned about." The "they" here, breaking the quote, is in reference to the Taiwan headquarters, which receives the blame for all of these actions. We asked MSI what we ask any angry commenters. Did you even watch the video? After confirmation, we said, okay, so then you know that the title is pretty tame. If I titled it something, I firmly believe it. I will forfeit sponsorships before I change my content to match a manufacturer's request. MSI's rep said, okay, gotcha. I will check with HQ on this and discuss about them with the video. We suggested that they ask HQ why HQ uses the same MOSFETs on all the motherboards. We'll put the rest of the conversation on the screen, but won't read it further. So here's our opinion of this situation. It seems that no one is standing up to HQ. The US headquarters has its own staff and can stand against the main headquarters without risking losses, but it has decided not to do so. Other companies like Gigabyte employ people in the US whose entire job is to push back against HQ's demands when they are not compliant with how the media should work. In this instance, MSI doesn't have an equivalent contact who pushes back. This next section, I'm going to talk about how it seems like MSI tries to stall criticism. This is one that a lot of reviewers have run into, probably with more companies than some of the other issues, and it's less directly evil or slimy and more of just It's either a stalling tactic to try and delay publication and delay harm so that the content goes up after it's relevant and people don't care as much, don't watch it as much, or sometimes it's genuinely because the company's trying to fix the product. We've certainly seen that a lot. Several of the case companies over the years, we've talked about how they have tried to fix things because of the reviews we've had in flight, in progress, not published yet. But in this case, MSI uses delaying publication as a tactic to try and reduce the relevance and diminish the meaning of the reviewer's work such that the viewership is lower, and so MSI's damage is perceived to be lower. So this is one that we can talk about from the perspective of both GN and from what Tech Team GB has shared with us. MSI tries to stall publication of criticism. It promises internal validation of results. We've learned that going straight to the PMs and the engineers solves basically all of this. You need to know the right people in the company. You scoop past PR, and you go straight to the people who actually do the work. And in every instance, and basically all of these companies we've worked with, the engineers and the PMs, as stated earlier, have always been pretty honest with us. So if you can get to them, then you might get an answer on the follow-up testing that MSI keeps promising and begging you to delay content. We'll put some screenshots of conversations on the screen during all this, but they beg to delay the content so they can look into it, which is fine. That's fair. But there's a limit to the amount you can delay, and one does expect at some point that the results will come back and they'll say whether it's valid or not. As a few examples, back when we tested MSI's M.2 heat shield, we did a lot of testing and were able to produce content around the fact that the shield, at least with the hardware we tested, actually made thermals worse. And MSI called it literally a heat shield. It was intended to be a sink, not a shield, but the end result was that in a lot of instances it made performance worse. But we validated it on multiple other products. MSI internally validated the results as well, and it just never shared them with us. So instead what happened was the company kept telling us, please stay tuned, we're gonna test it, please don't do follow-ups, we're gonna try and see what's happening, and then the company goes silent. And about a year later, after I had toured several factories and facilities of MSI in various parts of Asia, we learned from engineers that they were able to validate our results, and they saw the same stuff as us. And this has also happened with Hardware Unboxed, by the way, where he's done work where MSI has validated his results with VRM testing in the past, and MSI doesn't always share it directly, but I'm sure he's got ways to go fetch it just like we do if you bypass the wrong people. So anyway, MSI in that instance actually attacked us in public streams. MSI later removed those streams after we went through legal channels and said, WTF you doing? Like, 1, you're wrong, 2, you're attacking media, and 3, your engineers proved you wrong. So anyway, that was kind of how they dealt with it at the time. They removed all the content where they attacked us. We did save it all though. And that was their way of dealing with criticism. With Tech Team GB, we have several additional examples of where MSI was trying to stall his publication of the review, and they were trying to do so, it seems, indefinitely. So it's one thing to ask for some time to validate data, but it does need to be validated and shared with the reviewer. That's the fairness. You're saying, I will give you time out of fairness, but you need to come back to me with your results. Otherwise, I'm publishing. Last section here, not gonna read the emails, but we'll put some of the stuff on screen. So we've had numerous instances of how MSI strings along reviewers as well. It does this with new reviewers. We don't have this issue these days. Again, we buy any part we want to test, and if that's the way we need to do it, that's fine. We have done that. But with newer reviewers, it's not wrong as a reviewer to try and get samples, and it's not wrong, especially as a newer reviewer, to do what you can in the ethical sense to get in the door with the company and get the samples. That might include meeting them at a trade show, meeting them at their HQ, whatever, but you're trying to show like, hey, I'm serious, I'm not just trying to get free stuff. But what MSI does is they will repeatedly, over years, in the cases of our email threads we have with them, promise that you'll get to keep the card next time, or whatever it is. It was always video cards for us. And to just explain, if you're not aware, reviewers often want to keep the product not because they or we want to use it personally. I have an FX8370 at home. It's underclocked and undervolted. I have an old video card. I don't care. All this stuff stays here specifically for the business. So reviewers typically want to keep this stuff for regression testing. All those revisits we do, that's because we try to keep the hardware, or because you're doing work where you're trying to provide a value for the viewer and do more than just benchmarking the newest stuff. So you can have a comparative as new things come out, which is sort of regression testing, but slightly different. So that's why you try to keep the cards if you can. And what MSI will do is, when you're in the process of reviewing something, it will repeatedly promise that you might get to keep it, you'll get to keep it next time, whatever. And the whole point of that, we think, our perception is to try and get it so that the reviewer leans positive such that MSI will fulfill its promise of letting you keep the product next time. That clearly didn't work with us, but it could work with some people, especially if they're new, they don't have money, they're trying to get this thing going, and they think, you know what, I can sacrifice a little bit of ethics right now for longer term gains or whatever. But even if it's not conscious like that, it's very likely subconscious, or at least MSI hopes it becomes subconscious, where the reviewer is tweaking what they're saying in their write-up, or video as it is these days, so that they can try to keep the card next time. But it ends up backfiring in cases with us. We've got plenty of examples of that. And hopefully, we sincerely hope it would backfire with other reviewers too, who want to be ethical and do this the right way. But that's what MSI tries to do. They try to string you along and say, you'll get it next time, with the implicit being that it might tweak consciously or subconsciously the opinion that is presented at the end with hopes of keeping the next product. So we think this is also very unethical, even if MSI doesn't. MSI would never admit to doing it this way. They'd be like, well, we don't have enough of them. But some of these products, they had a lot. Like, they couldn't even sell some of these because no one wanted them. So our perception is that it's a tactic. And our perception, given the context of everything else, is that MSI has a deeply rooted problem where it is training people, we think, to go out there and try to influence reviewers in a way which is beyond what is acceptable, in a way which is beyond reason. There's a lot of things that people will try to do to sort of pull your arm a little bit. And whether or not the company's representatives are ethical really hinges upon, is it pulling your arm, like trying to twist it to change your opinion of things, which would typically be done with threatening samples, or is it more like trying to like hang this fruit over you, have like a fishing rod with some money on it or something to try and pull you along? And that's where, as a reviewer, it's really important, if you're watching this and you're in this space, it's really important that you decide what kind of outlet you want to be and what kind of things, where do you draw the line on where you allow the companies to help you and where you don't. And stuff as simple as dinners, we don't. Flights, we don't. Hotels, we don't anymore. So anyway, our thoughts are that MSI has serious problems. They're deeply rooted. The company is behaving exceptionally unethically. It is not okay, and we're not going to go easy on them when talking about things like this, but it also won't influence the review of the products, because unlike MSI, we actually have ethics, and we will try to draw the line to divide where the product starts and where the company's shitty behavior starts. That's what I think. So that's it for this one. Check out Tech Team GB. Definitely his dedication to doing things correctly is admirable. It reminds me of how when I started, I would struggle with these same types of issues and not have quite the platform to deal with it in a way that was it didn't have as much impact as it does today. So check him out. But MSI, get it together. Go to store.gamersnexus.net to help us out directly and offset the cost of us forfeiting the ads we just gave MSI, or go to patreon.com/gamersnexus to help us out there as well. Subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.